Amen.
Amen.
Is to have the presence of God manifest. I want to preach for a while. I just want to. I touched on these thoughts before, but on Moses' prayer when he said, "Show me your glory, show me your glory," and if you look at that word "show," it's like it's one thing to say, "Let me see your glory," but Moses went beyond "Let me see your glory." He said, "Show me your glory." Show involves more than just getting to see it or catch a glimpse of it, but in showing there's a demonstration, and it conveys a little more. Moses said, "I don't want just a glimpse now and then," but he says, "I want you to show me your glory, and I want to understand something of the glory. I want to know what it is, this mysterious thing we call glory, this essence of whatever we don't know how to describe sometimes glory. I want to understand a little more, but I want to move in it." And that's all contained in Moses' prayer. Look with me, if you have your Bibles, Exodus chapter 32. Moses had been through a lot of changes. As you know, he grew up in the palace and was perhaps next in line to be Pharaoh of Egypt, the most powerful nation on the earth. He identified with the people of God. And because of the burden and the vision that God put on his heart, he said no to all the treasures and all the pleasures of Egypt. He turned his back on the world and all the gold and all the glory of the world in order to do the will of God. He paid a price. He paid an incredible price to do the will of God. Hebrews tells us that Moses chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And there was some pleasure in sin. I don't know about you, but I had some pleasure in sin. And just glad I lived to tell you about it. There was some pleasure in sin, but there was also a price tag. And Moses figured that out. He chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin. He understood how temporary they were, and he understood that the wages of sin is death. I'm not like these people who tell you, "Oh man, everything was just messed up. I was so miserable." Hey, I was miserable as a sinner, but I had some good times too. But I tell you, the trade to exchange that for what I have now, there's no comparison. Those of you who've been touched by the glory and know anything of the glory of God can say the same thing, that there's nothing to go back to. Nothing to go back to. And Moses was that way. He turned his back on it all. I mean, when you think of pleasure with Moses, I'm talking about the most beautiful women in Egypt meeting him at the door every time he came in from a campaign, fanning him with banana leaves, bringing him iced tea, dancing for him, or anything else his little mind might desire. Moses had it. He said no to all of it. All the money, all the power, all the prestige, all the pleasure. He said no to it because he considered that the glory of God was more valuable than everything in this world. Oh, I mean, if we really understood, understood in the way of having revelation about it, we'd realize that a few moments in an atmosphere like we were in this morning is worth more than any treasure this world could give us. Amen. Moses prayed, "Show me your glory." Look at, he'd been through a lot. He came through all that. Then because he took matters in his own hands and made a mess of things, and he ended up on the backside of the desert for 40 years watching his father-in-law's sheep. Miserable existence. Then he goes back to Egypt, and all the miracles God did, everything happened, brought him out with silver and gold. There's not one feeble among their tribe. Incredible manifestations of the power of God. Came to the Red Sea, stretched out the rod, the sea parted. He's in the wilderness, but now he's been marching through the wilderness with all these murmuring, complaining people who, in spite of all the miracles they'd seen, are still living in doubt and unbelief. And Moses had a terrible weight on him that he had to bear. He'd gone and received the 10 Commandments, came down, saw the people partying, built a golden calf. They're worshiping the golden calf. He was so mad he threw the tablets down, broke them. Now he's gone back to the mountain. God's going to write his laws on new tablets. And Moses we find him here after just the summary I gave you of these things. Exodus chapter 32, verse 31 and 32 says, Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, this people have sinned a great sin and have made them gods of gold." Sounds kind of like the United States of America in 2011, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe you think people aren't worshiping gold in this country today? Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book, which thou hast written. Pretty heavy sin. And a whole lot of love in that prayer, isn't it? Moses said, if you won't forgive them, then blot me out too. Don't have time to preach about intercession, but that's a real intercessor. Now look, we move from that horrible sin to Exodus 33. Moses is still praying in verse 7 of the next chapter. Just to try to follow this and really grasp what God's saying here. Moses took the tabernacle and pitched it without the camp, or outside the camp, afar off from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of the congregation. It came to pass that everyone which sought the Lord went out. Everyone which sought the Lord went out under the tabernacle of the congregation, which was without the camp. How many of you know the book of Acts church is without the camp today?
Yeah. Come on.
You do realize you're not a part of the mainstream modern day Christianity.
Right.
All right. Which was without the camp. And it came to pass when Moses went out under the tabernacle, all the people rose up, stood every man at his tent door, and looked after Moses until he was gone in the tabernacle. Millions of people, and they're watching this one man. Why in the world so many people watching one man? Because the glory of God was all over. And there was something different about him. They were watching. He's going out the tabernacle. Came to pass, into the tabernacle. The cloudy pillar descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. Don't you want to be a person who can experience this sort of thing where you meet people when they walk in the room, the atmosphere changes? You ever been around people like that?
Yeah.
Some for the good, some for the worse. The atmosphere changes because something comes in the room with them. Moses, going to the tabernacle, the clouded pillar descended, stood at the door of the tabernacle. Look at this. And the Lord talked with Moses.
Amen.